Hello, great souls. Welcome to Living Yoga Satsang. Let's begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and beloved Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Guide us in our time together. Help us to dive deeply into these teachings. Help us to receive and absorb the gifts and blessings that are offered here for us. And help us to share these freely, joyfully with all. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, so I apologize. Last week we had some technical difficulties. If you were trying to watch, we were able to post a recording to my YouTube channel. So if you type in Vivekadevi Noh-Kuhn, you spell my last name Noh-Kuhn, you can find that posting. So it did come out clear in the recording, but on live stream it didn't work, or Facebook last week. So I apologize for that. So this week we're returning then to a beautiful chapter. I'm happy to discuss it again. This is chapter 33, Babaji, the Yogi Christ of modern India. So Babaji is, in yoga teachings and in this path, he is a Maha Avatar. So what that means is the avatar is one who's fully liberated. So they've realized their highest self. They live in perfect communion with God, and they can materialize their physical body. They can incarnate on any planet, anywhere they could incarnate, and they would do so for to serve. An avatar would be coming with a purpose. So Jesus was an avatar, Buddha avatar, Moses, Yogananda said, was a master, and so Maha, with the difference with Maha for Babaji is that he has a mission in terms of being in his physical body for a very long rhythm. So I think there's a little I know there's a section in here that talks about that, and if I find the exact wordings, I'll read it for you. I'm not sure. Well, it's all important. I don't want to say anything's not important. If Yogananda wrote it, it's important. It matters. It's just a matter of what to highlight and what to focus on. And there's a lot in this chapter. So I'll just go through the chapter piece by, kind of in segments here. And I'll reflect and speak on what stands out to me and what Yogananda has shared. So the very beginning of the chapter says, the northern Himalayan crags near Brindaban Badranan, are still blessed by the living presence of Babaji, Guru of Lahiri Mahashaya. The secluded master has retained his physical form for centuries, perhaps millenniums. The deathless Babaji is an avatara. So this is where I was talking about avatar. And in Hindu scriptures, avatara signifies the descent of divinity into flesh. So again, as I was saying, fully realized soul into taking a physical form. The difference between an avatar and myself is that, or those of us who have not yet fully realized the true nature of our soul. So A master is one who is living in full realization of their divinity. And that's perfect alignment, communion, unity with cosmic consciousness. So there are levels actually of samadhi, which is a state of enlightenment, of that oneness. There's nirvikalpa samadhi, and oh gosh, I know this, and now the other phrase has gone out of my mind. Let me just say this: there's two stages of samadhi. I remember one teacher in Ananda saying to me at that point, she said the levels of distinction, people are always curious about it, but really once you've reached samadhi, you're so close, it won't matter to you. But they do point it out, and one distinction is to be in a state of samadhi in meditation, and the next level, nirvikalpa samadhi, is when you're able to maintain that state of cosmic consciousness all the time. Eating, walking, communicating, working, whatever you're doing, you are always in a state of perfect inner communion with the divine. And that was Yogananda. Swamiji said it was, I'm trying to think of the word that he used. It was difficult for his mind to get around this experience that he had in the presence of Yogananda, because it was obvious that Yogananda was in a state of cosmic consciousness. He could see that he was when he looked into his eyes, and yet he was also had a personality in a physical body and navigated through the human world. And the miracles that he performed that were associated with him, many of them very subtle. So it would be slightly after the fact that someone would notice, hey, that just happened. One that leaps to mind is Dr. Lewis, his first male disciple here in United States. He had a day when Yogananda came to visit him, and it had been raining and raining and raining and stormy. And the car pulled up, and Yogananda had, I guess, when Dr. Lewis came down to go out to the car, everything towards the car, the rain had stopped, and everything was dry, perfectly dry, as if it hadn't rained at all. And Yogananda smiled at him and said, "For you, Dr. Lewis." So he wanted to go on a drive with him, and he knew that the weather would make it challenging, and so he gave him, it was miraculous. And Dr. Lewis noticed it, looked around, and got in the car and later talked about it as, just the miracles. They're profound, they're powerful, and there's also a personal sweetness to them. But they are also intended as messages of hope for all of us, to remind us, to call to us, to our souls, to say, we have this potential within us. Our destiny, our spiritual destiny, is to be fully realized. And as we move forward in the spiritual path, which is, I say forward, but really it's shedding all sense of separateness from our divine self and from inner communion, as we continue in that until the point where we're perfectly aligned and fully awake. I'm reminded of when they asked Buddha, "Who are you?" He said, "I am awake." That was his response. So all these great traditions highlighting a similar truth. So this is our potential, this is our destiny. And Babaji, in this line of masters, is, there's a way in which he's at the helm. I don't know how else to say it. In fact, it said that Babaji and Christ together have, they're overseeing the salvation of the planet. So it talks about that in here. So let me just kind of go through the chapter and come here. So the Maha Avatar. So the Maha Avatar is in constant communion with Christ. And this is Babaji, speaking of Babaji. Together, they send out vibrations of redemption and have planned the spiritual technique of salvation for this age. The work of these two fully illumined masters, one with a body and one without, is to inspire the nations to forsake suicidal wars, race hatreds, religious sectarianism, and the boomerang evils of materialism. Babaji is well aware of the trend of modern times, especially of the influence and complexities of Western civilization, and realizes the necessity of spreading the self-liberations of yoga equally in the West and the East. So, this book was written quite a while ago now, let's see if it has it right here. 1946 is what I want to say, but I'm not sure if that's accurate. 1946, yeah, first edition was 1946. So at that time, it wasn't as widely, we weren't a global community in the way that we are now. It's a beautiful advancement that we are much more consciously connected with one another. So the fact that at that time, Babaji was and that's why Yogananda came to the United States, why he came to the West. He was sent here from Babaji. He was sent to bring the teachings of yoga so that the West and the East could come together. I talked about this at the very beginning of these talks on the autobiography, because it starts out that way, talking about the mission. So, that's still where Babaji and Christ are. They're looking at the whole planet, so the salvation is for everyone. Right? We're all equal in God's eyes. So there is no distinction. The things that we see as separate, religion or race or, anything, we could, even different bodies, right? So I have one body, you have a different body. It appears on a material level that we're separate from one another. But in the teaching of yoga, we are one. So my thoughts affect you, your thoughts affect me. And that's why in the practice of yoga, we're careful about our thoughts, right? Thoughts are things. They have a power to them. And that's very good news in terms of being able to work with them consciously. And when we're unconscious about our thoughts, we can hurt ourselves or others, not realizing the impact that they have. So this is Babaji's mission, and we are the beneficiaries of this mission to look out for the planet and to keep sending these spiritual vibrations. So that's another part of the teaching, that something Yogananda spoke often of is at the time, because radio was new and it was a way, I still find it a nice metaphor for the practice. And he was saying, we have all these radio waves we're not aware of. We can't hear them. Most of us can't hear them, but a radio can receive them. We too are like a radio. When we tune ourselves through yoga practice, through paying attention to what we eat, what we listen to, all the guidelines, the yamas and niyamas, nonviolence, truthfulness, cleanliness, all these different ways of behaving, thinking, working with our consciousness, not from a sense of to make us good, because in the teaching of yoga, we are good. The yamas and the niyamas are there to help us live in our own true soul nature. Our soul resonates with them. We feel better when we think well of ourselves or others. Our consciousness soars with kindness and compassion and tenderness. It does, it's just automatic within us. Now, we might have a strong pattern of going in a different direction. And I was reading recently, I've shared often the art and science of Raja Yoga. in there, Swami Kriyananda says, human beings have the capacity to, I think this actually comes from Sri Yukteswar, we have the capacity to alter our natural taste. So our natural inclinations, most animals are just who they are, right? And that's a blessing, right? Elephants don't try to be giraffes. They're elephants. Right? That's just who they are. Human beings aren't that way. So we can really behave outside, certainly, of our highest nature. So it's a great blessing in the teaching of yoga to be born in a human body. We have, Yogananda said, a nervous system and a brain that's structured in such a way that not only are we conscious of ourselves, so we have self-awareness, but we can use that consciousness to tune our radio station, our being, to the divine and receive it, right? To receive the emanations of light, to receive the divine energy, to receive the blessings that Babaji is sending and Christ are sending to us, all the masters. We're fully capable of that, and that's why they've come. That's why they're here. That's why new masters will be incarnated. Right? Yogananda said, many paths to God. So part of that is because we manifest physically with different karma and different tendencies, and we need to hear the truth in different ways. It's the same truth. The truth isn't any different. It's the same truth. If you, especially when you're able, he said, all true paths, and there are many true spiritual paths, will be teaching the same thing in its essence. The specifics will be different. The techniques can be different. It's one of the reasons it's encouraged that once you find a path and you really know it's yours, to stay with that and put your energy to going deeper and deeper into that particular path than trying a little bit from this path, a little bit from that path, because the techniques are often different. And you can confuse yourself. I've seen this with students where, so again, it's not a dogma of you're bad if you do it. It's just that it can confuse you in your spiritual life because you're trying this particular practice says breathe out 3 times, then inhale this many, then do this. Then it's like, yeah, that's all in line with a particular tradition. If I don't know that tradition, I always refrain from commenting on it. I just say, I just say that. I just say I don't know that tradition. So I know this tradition. I know the techniques and practices and tools of this tradition. And for myself, I practice these. If someone else is telling me of a technique, I'm unlikely to practice a different technique. Very unlikely to. Yeah, I am unlikely to, because I have enough in this path. There's enough techniques for me. I'm still trying to fit all the techniques in of this path. But I don't look at the other technique as wrong. I don't look at it as wrong. I think there's beautiful tools out there, and I have no problem with my students studying those if that works for them. So there's a part of the spiritual journey in which seeking and trying different tools and paths, I did that certainly, is just right for you. It's just that once you're on a particular path and it's clear this is yours, you're encouraged to dive deeply into that. And then, stay open to the guidance, divine guidance for your next right step. And okay, so back to Babaji. What do I want to say here? There's so much in this. I find myself light in my mood today, and Babaji is so deep. So it's interesting to me that I'm feeling that way. So I call on Babaji to guide the talk, and I'll just trust that. I'll just trust that that's the way it's coming through. But I'm mentioning that because as light as I am in my countenance, I feel very, very deeply about this chapter and about this great avatar who is blessing all of us. So let's see, the Peerless Master, I'll just read some quotes from the chapter. The Peerless Master moves with his group from place to place in the mountains. And this was a disciple of Lahiri Mahashaya's telling Yogananda. He was telling him this. His small band contains 2 highly advanced American disciples. I find that very interesting. His Babaji has been in one locality for some time. Oh, I'm sorry, this is what he says. After Babaji has been in one locality for some time, he utters a Sanskrit phrase which translates to, "Let us lift our camp and staff." And his group moves instantaneously to another place. He does not always employ this method of astral travel. Sometimes he goes on foot from peak to peak. So I love to think of Babaji, and people have seen him. You know, there are many stories of people seeing him, and it talks here about that's his discretion, who he reveals himself to. I am reminded just in this moment, speaking of that, there's a beautiful woman who lives in our community who follows another spiritual path. She is a living guru, and who doesn't live in this area. He's in the United States, actually, and he's on the East Coast. And she's out here, and she was saying to him, "I want to live in a spiritual community." She's been saying this for some time, and he would say to her, "You will, you will." And then right before she moved into this community, various things happened in her life, and she was starting to look for a house, and he said, "Don't buy a house. Don't buy a house. Get an apartment." And she thought, "An apartment?" She was just telling me this story, and I've heard this story in parts. So, okay, and then she heard of this community. It's this apartment complex. It's a spiritual community, but just an apartment, modest apartment complex. And so the first week that she moved in here, I don't know if it was the first night, but the first week, she was looking, her apartment faces the green. She has a window that faces our central green. And after midnight or something, she was looking out the window and she saw Yogananda walking toward her, walking right up toward where she was looking down. She didn't think it was Yogananda. She thought it was someone who looked exactly like Yogananda. She thought, "Wow, he looks exactly like Yogananda." So she's looking out at him, he's looking at her, and they just look at each other. She said maybe about 5 minutes, and then he went away. And the next day, she talked to one of the managers in the community and said, "Who lives here that looks like Yogananda?" And he said, "No one lives here who looks like Yogananda." She said, "Really?" And then she told, "I saw someone who looks dressed in orange, looks exactly like Yogananda." No one looks like Yogananda who lives, and no one does who looks like Yogananda. And then she knew it was Yogananda had come. He's not her guru, but this is her spiritual community. And she said that to me. She said, "This is my spiritual family, my spiritual community." And I feel it. We both felt that when we met each other. It's so beautiful, right? So the masters come. That hasn't happened to me yet. It's okay that it hasn't. I'm blessed by her experience. I'm blessed by her experience. I really am. I have no doubt it happened. It has happened. We've heard this. We've heard people who aren't part of Ananda who see Yogananda when they're visiting Ananda. It's happened. A mom came and to stay with her adult children. She was out walking in the meadow. She met Yogananda. She didn't know it was Yogananda. And she said, "Oh, dude, this is such a lovely place." He said, "It is." I said, "Do you come here often?" "I do. I'm here all the time." She said, "Oh, I'm visiting." And they had a chat. She went home, saw a picture of him. "Oh, I saw him today." Her daughter's like, "What do you mean you saw him today?" "I saw him today. Yeah, we talked." So these masters, they reveal themselves for a purpose. There's always a purpose, and it's always a blessing. Always a blessing. So Babaji travels, is said, with his band. He has a small band, and they either travel immediately, astral travel, by uttering a few sacred words, or they hike, they walk. So then there are 2 stories that are shared. And in the book it says, 2 amazing incidents of Babaji's life are known to me. Again, this is Kebalananda, who's talking to Yogananda. His disciples were sitting one night around a huge fire, which was blazing for a sacred Vedic ceremony. the master suddenly seized a burning log and lightly struck the bare shoulder of a chela, this is a disciple, who was close to the fire. Sir, how cruel! Lahiri Mahashaya, who was present, made this remonstrance. Would you, and then Babaji responds, would you rather have seen him burn to ashes before your eyes, according to the decree of his past karma? With these words, Babaji placed his healing hand on the chela's disfigured shoulder. I have freed you tonight from painful death. The karmic law has been satisfied through the slight suffering by fire. So this is a very deep teaching in yoga, that the masters mitigate our karma. They're always doing that. When we call on them for guidance, support, protection in our life, they protect us. The yoga path, the yoga, again, I'm speaking of yoga, but the deep spiritual teachings have a powerful vibration that come with them. And in the teaching of yoga, the masters are mitigating our karma for us. So maybe I had a karma for, in this case, he said a serious disfigurement of fire. Instead, the disciple still had to experience the karma. So there was an injury. It was painful. The guru delivered it, right? So he delivered that injury intentionally, and then he healed him. Well, he did it also in front of others so they could learn and see and share that teaching, right? So that we could receive that teaching and know it. It is a practice, a spiritual practice, to believe that all, Yogananda said, what comes to you, let it come. And then you use tools and practices and the grace of the guru to navigate that in the highest way possible. So don't fight what unfolds in your life, right? That doesn't mean that you don't challenge things. There's a difference between, and this is where deep discernment is required for behavior. I've talked about that many times. But this principle here, to know when difficulty comes, right? We receive the difficulty, draw on the grace, practice our tools, and respond. You know, maybe the responding is standing up to something. That could be true. But what we don't do is say, this shouldn't be happening to me, and push against it in a way that isn't from a place of empowered strength. It isn't meeting it, right? So if it happens, maybe something's happening and I know that something should be done about that, right? Something should be done about that. But I engage. That's a very different thing than trying to push energetically against it. I have no divine power can flow through me in that way. So it's a subtle difference. I don't know if you can hear that. So the idea is that we have karma. There is a destiny, and it is simply the karma is a way. Let's see. There's a few ways to talk about it. And I know that we don't have much time, so I'll definitely come back to this. I'll pick up here next time. But I will say this about karma. Ultimately, it's a blessing. So it's not a punishment where, whatever would cause someone to have the karma being burned up, that's not about a punishment. However, the masters are wanting to help us because sometimes we send out vibrations. They simply come back to us, right? I've sent it out and it comes back. So there's a neutrality of it just is. I did that, it's coming back to me. If I'm aligning my consciousness with divine consciousness, the masters can help us. They always want to. It's just our level of receptivity. Am I with the master's consciousness that the master can intervene for me? So it's also been described as like when the rain can still happen. I talked to the rain earlier, but the master's like an umbrella. So it's still happening. I'm still in the rain, but I'm not as affected by it in my consciousness because I have a relationship with divine grace. Okay, great souls. That's as much as I could get through today. I hope it was helpful for you. I will say this, it's spoken later in the chapter, but it feels important to mention that whenever the name of Babaji is spoken in reverence, we draw a blessing to us. So the very fact that we're talking about Babaji today is quite powerful. And I just want to say that if you draw on inwardly, offer gratitude, appreciation, call to Babaji in any way you feel, the receptive heart receives that divine emanation, which is going out to us, that we're tuning into the radio station. So wishing you a beautiful day, beautiful week, and many blessings to you.